excited to be with you because today we have for a full show Gina Trim nutritionist, our favorite nutritionist. She is going to pull back the covers. We're going to do some truth telling about sugar tonight. So, how many of you did you make a New Year's resolution to get refined sugar out of your diet? Did you make a New Year's resolution to get on a healthier track? Well, Gina, tonight we're going to make the entire conversation about the truth about sugar. What is sugar? What sugar does? What it doesn't do? What sugar is disguised in? And in some places where it exists, where you might not even know that it exists. So a brand new take. That's what we do. We take a different and new approach to looking at what we eat, why we eat it, so that we can get bodies that will serve us, bodies that we love. Gina, thank you so much for jumping on tonight. So happy to see you, happy to talk to you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So, Gina,
Yes.
first question. First question. People think they know what sugar is. What exactly is sugar?
Well, I mean, sugar comes in many forms. We have natural sugar and we have artificial sweet sugar. And then, I mean, basically, as we all know, it's here to utilize to sweeten things up, make them taste better. But again, there are, like I said, there are the natural sources of sugar too. So it comes in many different forms, like you mentioned before.
So tell me, what's the difference between brown sugar and white sugar?
Well, I mean, brown sugar and white sugar. So it's a lot to do with the processing. When you think about a sugar cane, think about the think about it in its natural form. So what does sugar look like? We don't necessarily, not everybody knows, but if you think about the sugar cane, it's natural in its natural form, it's going to be brown. When it's processed and refined, it turns white, right? So it's kind of like the theory, like with behind, like with when you think about rice, it's processed when it's white, it's natural in its natural state, it's brown. Um, Now, is it better for you per se? Is always the question. And there's a lot of debate behind that. My thing with sugar is sugar is sugar. It comes in all forms, and it's about how much you're putting in your body and monitoring that. So I think, like, when you think about sugar, um what's the bad stuff? I would say the first thing to think about, what's the bad stuff, that we've got to look at artificial first, right? Because that's the fake stuff, right? That's not the real source. Now, brown and white, I mean, people use it for different reasons. Sometimes for baking, brown sugar will appear more so than white. But when it comes down to those two, I can't really tell you that there's a major difference or one's healthier than the other. When we're really looking at sugar, I think it's really about, like I said, the amount, and what source it's coming from. So I think a big popular word that everybody knows is high fructose syrup. I mean,
Mhm.
that's one that I can go with, and it still appears in a lot of foods. That would be, in my opinion, what I would call a bad sugar, because it spikes your glycemic load very, very quickly, very high. So when we're talking about being diabetic or pre-diabetic or having, health problems related to sugar, those are the types of things that are going to give you an immediate spike that aren't healthy for your body per se, and can lead to other things if you're consuming them quite often. So I would say high fructose, kind of the faker sugars are that. I mean, you're thinking about some of the packets, the yellow packets, the pink packets, the blue packets. Those are artificial, man-made sweeteners that are processed. So what's natural? Think about fruit. Fruit is probably the best example of where a natural source of sugar is going to be. But I think sometimes the confusion with that is, oh, it's healthy, it's great. It is, but I've said before, you can overdo it with that. You can have like 5 servings of a fruit in one day. It's like equivalent to drinking a soda in the amounts of sugar. So there has to be some kind of portioning. But if we're thinking about what would be the better source, absolutely fruit, because it's natural. fructose, is a natural source of sugar. Sucrose is like table sugar, right? So that's the type of stuff.
Run that by me one more
Sure.
time. The difference between fructose and sucrose.
Fructose is something you're going to find like in fruit, right? So that's like a more natural. It's natural. So is sucrose. Sucrose is kind of, it's more like it's a table sugar. That's the easiest way to, you're going to add that, right? Fructose is more so found naturally in foods.
So
Um,
it's like fructose is FR and then fruit is FR. And that's
right.
how you remember that they go together.
Yep. Yep. That's a good way to remember. I know that's how I started when I was trying to differentiate between the two. But I think, like I said, like I think that's the biggest misconception I find that I always caution people with is with fruit. It's not the enemy, it's not that it's bad, but you've got to watch it because sugar is sugar. Your body does not differentiate between, oh, this is sugar from an apple and this is sugar from a cookie. You see what I'm saying, kind of?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh, your body doesn't differentiate that sugar. The difference I'm guessing is that if you have an apple or if you have some other fruit that has fructose in it, as opposed to some other a cookie
Right. It can't
that
necessarily
has
differentiate. Yeah,
one would have more nutritional value to go along with the sweetness,
exactly.
whereas the other one would not have any nutritional value.
Exactly.
Is that right?
Yep, that's right. And then I would say too, like there are sugars that actually are are healthier for the body to basically absorb and metabolize. So when you're thinking about it too, like you don't want to say like all sugar is bad, but when you're thinking about all the different sugars out there, there are some that are better for your body and they don't necessarily spike your blood sugar as quickly as some of the other ones. So high fructose is going to spike you really fast, right?
So,
Fructose,
so other than high fructose, which are the ones that aren't good for your body?
well, I mean, again, I'm gonna say I don't want to say aren't good for your body, but it's just that they can spike your blood sugar faster than others. So high fructose is going to be one. I think there's so many names for sugar, Michelle, that one of the easiest ways I find to help people kind of be a sugar detective is knowing that think about when you're looking at your ingredients. When you see the word ose, that suffix, that's a sugar. So you have sucrose, fructose, right? Dextrose. These are things that are commonly seen in different types of foods. So when you see that ose, that's a sugar. So when you're looking at a food label, look at that food label and see how many times you see a word that ends in OSE, right? You might see it 4 or 5 different times, but it's a different word. So there's so many different names. I think that's where some people get confused. It's like, oh, it didn't I saw sugar, but knowing that sugar has many names. And as we go through it, I think the more foreign they are to you, those are the ones that are a good red flag to kind of think about as far as like, that's not necessarily the best one that I want in my body.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think when you're uncovering them, it's a lot of different words. But if you are really privy to the word OSE. The other one is OL because there's sugar alcohols. So sugar alcohols is another one. So sorbitol, xylitol, those types of things. Those will spike your blood sugar as well. Um, when we're breaking down agave, honey, those things. What's the other one that a lot of people use? Maple syrup. These are all things, they're sugar, but they can spike your glucose pretty quickly, so you want to have them in moderation. I think the most dangerous one out there is the high fructose.
The
Yeah,
high
yeah,
fructose corn syrup.
absolutely. Yeah,
So what happens? I know, I used to be a sugar addict, really,
yeah,
and anything sweet. And I guess maybe once you're an addict, you're always an addict. but I don't, what I have found now is that since I stopped eating, really, processed sugar, the
Yeah.
high fructose corn syrup, the white sugars, all that, all this like cakes and pies and all of that stuff, that my taste buds have changed. That what I used to, when I really used to gravitate and really crave, I guess, those sweets, just the taste of them. Now, um, that it's not so tasty to me.
Yeah.
It's not pleasurable to me, really, to eat sugar in that way.
Well, there's a lot of research behind sugar, and it's addictive, just like anything, like a cigarette or a drug for somebody. So, and what it does, and the receptors that it's reaching in our brains when we eat it, and then making it that addictive property that we keep coming back to over and over. So the receptors that it hits, that has a lot to do with making it addictive for a lot of people. So yeah, I mean, there are ways to gradually pull yourself off of it, and not, I mean, it's never going to be realistic to say I'm never going to eat sugar, right? But it's realistic to say I'm not going to eat added sugar, which I
Mhm.
think is the more important thing that we're looking at, especially with the food labels, which is nice that the Food and Drug Administration has changed those labels. So now they have to show us how many hidden sugars, so to speak, are in here, because they have to lay out how many added sugars. So I think that's another thing where people get a little confused is, oh, it didn't say, the food label originally didn't say there were sugars, right? It just has it in the ingredients. But now we can see what's added. And those are the numbers that we really want to pay attention to. How many added sugars are there? Reading the label, looking for the OSE, the OL, and the words that end in AL. So those are your three main like red flags to kind of look at for when you're thinking about what's healthier for me. So the
So when
added sugar. Mhm.
do those three red flags again. I need to
Yeah,
hear them, but I think there might be somebody else that needs to hear them too.
sure. So when you're reading your food labels, those three red flags would be looking for the ingredients that end in OSE, OL, or AL. That's your indicator right there that that word, that's a form of sugar, right? And so it's going to be in your label. And then when you look at the numbers, when they break it down, it's going to say how many added sugars are in here. Because you'll see, like, I mean, even in, sometimes you can look, and I've seen it in the store where applesauce has added sugar, right?
Right.
But it's a natural food with natural sugar. So that's when we want to say to ourselves, this isn't a good choice. I think it's easier when you think of it that way. You know what I mean? Like, think about the food in its natural state, naturally sweetened. So when we're adding these things, that's where people are getting into trouble and having the health problems and becoming diabetic or pre-diabetic and that kind of thing.
So what you just said to me seems like it's so important when you talked about the applesauce
Yeah.
having added sugar in it. I remember, Gina, just maybe like within the past 6 months or so ago, I bought some cashews. Now,
Mm,
anybody who knows me knows I'm a cashew freak, I love them, right? And and normally I wouldn't necessarily think that picking up a bag of nuts, I would need to read the label to make sure there's not sugar in it. But I did turn it over because they had like some sort of spices on them, you
yeah.
know, on them. And I was shocked to find out that the cashews sugar was one of the ingredients.
It's in the spice mix to balance that spice, the salty and the spiciness. Yeah.
Mhm.
And that's a hidden prime example of a hidden sugar right there. Had you not read that label, you would have never known, right?
Exactly. Exactly. I would have never known. And there's some things that I you don't